Hello and welcome to Indus News Live from Islamabad. I'm Hira Mustafa and these are the headlines. Pakistan's army says 4 terrorists have been killed during an intelligence-based operation in the northwestern province of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. The military's media wing says a soldier was martyred and 2 others were wounded in an exchange of fire with terrorists in the North Waziristan district. Ethiopia's military has warned 500,000 residents of Tigray's capital to flee as it seeks to launch a decisive assault. A military spokesperson told reporters that the onslaught would show no mercy. The action is part of Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's offensive to oust the dissident local government. Iran has vowed to defeat any Israeli attempt to harm its interests in Syria. In a statement, a spokesperson for the Foreign Ministry says Iran's presence in Syria is advisory. The warning comes days after Israel carried out airstrikes on the Syrian army and Iranian paramilitary targets in the country. The number of COVID-19 cases in the U.S. has topped 12 million with nearly 256,000 fatalities. India has recorded over 500 deaths in a day, bringing the tally to over 133,000 with nearly 9.1 million infections. Pakistan has registered over 2,600 new cases and 59 deaths overnight, taking the toll to 7,662. Globally, the virus has claimed over 1.37 million lives and infected more than 58 million. And in the English Premier League, Everton beat Fulham 3-2 in a thrilling encounter at Craven Cottage. They are now 6th on the table, while Fulham are just above the relegation zone. Well, these were the headlines. News in detail coming after the short break. Stay with us. Welcome back, and now the news in detail. Pakistan's army says 4 terrorists have been killed during an intelligence-based operation in the northwestern province of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. The military's media wing says a soldier was martyred and 2 others were wounded in an exchange of fire with terrorists in the North Waziristan district. It said as soon as the troops cordoned off the area, terrorists opened fire to distract them. However, all terrorists were gunned down by security forces during the operation. Last month, at least 6 soldiers were martyred in an attack on a security forces convoy in North Waziristan. The group of 20 economies has pledged to do needful to support poor countries as they struggle to recover from COVID-19 pandemic. Saudi Arabia is hosting the 2-day virtual summit to discuss how to deal with COVID-19 and its economic fallout. More in the following report.
The leaders expressed concern the pandemic might further deepen global divisions between the rich and the poor. The host stressed equal and equitable distribution of resources to eliminate the virus completely.
The pandemic has demonstrated that international cooperation is the optimal way to overcome crisis. We must focus on the most vulnerable segments. We must provide support for all countries of the world, for we would not be safe until everyone is safe.
China's President Xi Jinping proposed a global QR code system to enable cross-border movement amid the pandemic. QR codes are barcodes that hold information that can be scanned and read by smartphones. Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan said it is impossible to deal with the pandemic without cooperation. He added the countries with weaker economies should not be left to their fate. German Chancellor Angela Merkel went a step further, calling for collective preemptive and proactive preparedness for a similar challenge.
We need reliable funding, better cooperation, greater independence. And the G20 can provide important, indeed crucial support in this area. If we stand together across the globe, we can control and overcome this virus and its impact.
French President Emmanuel Macron said the world will need to choose between global cooperation and national selfishness. Russian President Vladimir Putin said Moscow is ready to provide its Sputnik V vaccine to other countries who need it. Putin added Russia is also preparing second and third vaccines against COVID-19, while U.S. President Donald Trump skipped the special side conference which was focused on the pandemic.
The number of COVID-19 cases in the U.S. has topped 12 million with nearly 256,000 fatalities. India has recorded over 500 deaths in a day, bringing the tally to over 133,000 with nearly 9.1 million infections. Globally, the virus has claimed more than 1.37 million lives and infected more than 58 million.
The second wave of COVID-19 is spreading at an unprecedented rate, infecting 2 million Americans in the past 12 days. To make things worse, millions of Americans are expected to travel for the upcoming Thanksgiving holiday, ignoring warnings from health officials. Meanwhile, Eastern Europe alone accounts for more than 5 million cases. Amid surging cases, the UK is set to announce a one-year package worth nearly $4 billion to support the state-run National Health Service. With an approved vaccine still not available, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration has given emergency use authorization for the antibody therapy that cured President Donald Trump. Meanwhile, Moderna Chief Executive Stefan Bancel has finally given a ballpark figure of what the vaccine would cost. In an interview, Bancel said Moderna will charge governments between $25 and $37 per dose.
In Pakistan, 59 people have lost their lives to COVID-19 overnight, registering the highest daily number since the second wave in the country. The health ministry says the death toll has risen to 7,662. The ministry said 2,665 tested positive for the virus in the last 24 hours. It said there are more than 36,000 active COVID-19 cases in the country. The ministry noted out of over 374,000 countrywide cases, nearly 330,000 have recovered so far. The southern province of Sindh has the highest number of cases with over 162,000 confirmed infections. The province capital city of Karachi has imposed smart and micro-smart 2-week lockdowns in various locations. Indian troops have launched so-called cordon and search operations in the Baramulla and Poonch districts in occupied Jammu and Kashmir. A joint team of Indian Army, police and paramilitary forces cordoned off the areas. The report says all entry and exit points were sealed by the Indian Forces personnel before the start of house-to-house searches in the area. Indian troops also arrested 2 persons during a military crackdown in Chatpura village of Pulwama district last night. Meanwhile, 3 Maoist freedom fighters have been killed in a gunfight with security forces in India's eastern Bihar state. An Indian paramilitary force says the encounter took place during search and area domination operations in Barachatti forest. It said authorities have recovered 2 weapons. The Maoists have been fighting for the rights of tribal people for more than 3 decades. Ethiopia's military has warned of 1 million residents of Tigray's capital to flee as it seeks to launch a decisive assault. A military spokesperson told reporters that the onslaught would show no mercy. The action is part of Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's offensive to oust the dissident local government. Hundreds of people are reported to have been killed, while tens of thousands have fled the fighting into neighboring Sudan. The Prime Minister has also dismissed calls for negotiations with Tigray's leadership. Iran has vowed to defeat any Israeli attempt to harm its interests in Syria. A foreign ministry spokesman, Saeed Khatibzadeh, said Iran's role in Syria is advisory. He said the era of hit-and-run attacks is over. The warning comes days after Israel carried out airstrikes on the Syrian army and Iranian paramilitary targets in the country. Over the years, Israel has repeatedly attacked Iranian targets and those of allied militia in Syria. Iran's backed Syrian President Bashar al-Assad against various rebel groups but denies having military forces in the country. Over in the U.S., a Pennsylvania court has dismissed a lawsuit from the Trump campaign seeking to invalidate millions of mail-in votes. The move paves the way for the state to certify Joe Biden's win by some 80,000 votes.
After a scathing court setback in Pennsylvania, President Donald Trump faces increased pressure from his fellow Republicans to drop his effort to overturn the United States presidential election and concede to Democrat Joe Biden. Since Biden was declared the winner 2 weeks ago, Trump has launched a barrage of lawsuits and mounted a pressure campaign to prevent states from certifying their votes total. So far, attempts to thwart certification have failed in courts in Georgia, Michigan, and Arizona. Now, a Republican federal judge dismissed a similar effort in Pennsylvania. District Judge Matthew Brand said he has no authority to take away the right to vote of even a single citizen. He described the case as strained legal arguments without merit and speculative accusations. In a statement, Trump's lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, said he was disappointed with the ruling and will seek an accelerated appeal. For Trump to have any hopes of overturning the election, he needs to reverse the outcome in Pennsylvania. This comes 2 days after a manual audit in the battleground state of Georgia declared Biden as the winner. Meanwhile, election officials in Wisconsin have accused Trump observers of obstructing a recount in the state's largest county.
Afghanistan's chief negotiator Abdullah says Kabul and the Taliban are very close to breaking a stalemate in peace talks. In an interview, chairman of the High Council for National Reconciliation, Abdullah said both sides will hopefully pass this phase and get to the substantial issues, including security. He added if a complete comprehensive ceasefire is not possible, reduction in violence could be an option. Abdullah warned that the increasing violence is damaging the trust of the people over the peace process. He said U.S. troops should withdraw from Afghanistan when the conditions are met. Abdullah's statement comes a day after U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo met the Taliban and the government negotiators in Doha. An international donor conference on Afghanistan is being virtually held next week. The two-day event will host around 70 states and international organizations. The last conference in Brussels pledged $15.2 billion from the period from 2017 to 2020. But diplomats said this could be cut by 15 to 20% this year due to the coronavirus fallout. Australia's defense chief says the country's forces must own the report that highlighted their crimes in Afghanistan. In an interview, General Angus Campbell vowed changes to avoid recurrence of such atrocities. The top military official said he will be held accountable until the report is dealt with thoroughly. Campbell said if the defense forces do not fix the horror, it will appear again. He said that is unacceptable.
I see layers of responsibility here, David, and that's why it's going to take a little while to work through this report, its recommendations, and to thoroughly implement it. I am determined to see deep, comprehensive and enduring change where it's needed.
The report found senior Australian commandos forced junior soldiers to kill defenseless captives in order to blood them for combat. And now moving on to Iraq, says ISIS militants have killed 8 people, including a village police chief in northern Saladin province. A provincial command officer said 10 others were wounded in the attack on Al-Msahag village. He said ISIS militants detonated an explosive device in a civilian car. The official said they opened fire when a joint force of police and the Hashd al-Shabi forces arrived. The Iraqi officer said ISIS militants withdrew from the village after the attack. Israel says it has bombed the western and southern parts of Gaza. Tel Aviv accused Hamas of firing a rocket at the southern city of Ashkelon. In a tweet, the Israeli Defense Forces said they struck Hamas targets, including rocket manufacturing sites. It said the airstrikes also targeted underground infrastructure, a training facility, as well as a military compound. There were no immediate reports of casualties. Hamas officials have not commented on the accusations. For the 22nd straight week, thousands of Israeli protest against Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in Jerusalem while demanding his resignation. Protesters say Netanyahu's indictment in major corruption and misuse of power disqualifies him from holding public office. Israelis also see Netanyahu's administration's response to the new surge of coronavirus as too slow. Protesters rally outside Netanyahu's official residence while blowing whistles, waving signs and flags.
We're protesting against a process, a very bad process that is happening here, kind of a dictatorship. We see many things that lead to dictatorship, like closing the court half a year ago, all the corona protocols.
And now it's time to take a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back, and now moving on to Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan says the EU must keep its promises to Ankara, including full membership of the bloc. Addressing the ruling party in Istanbul, he said Turkey sees itself as an inseparable part of Europe. Erdogan also urged the bloc to keep its promises regarding the issue of migrants. He was referring to a 2016 deal under which Ankara curbed migrant entries into Europe in exchange for financial help. The president said Ankara will never bow down to harsh rhetoric, veiled injustices and double standards. Turkey's drilling activities in a disputed part of the eastern Mediterranean have raised tensions with the EU members Greece and Cyprus. Azerbaijan's President Ilham Aliyev has praised Russia's peacekeeping efforts in the Nagorno-Karabakh region. This comes after Russia brokered a ceasefire agreement between Azerbaijan and Armenia. In a statement, Russia's defense ministry said Aliyev met Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu in Baku. It said both discussed the stabilization of the situation in Nagorno-Karabakh as Shoigu commended the effective ceasefire. Russia has sent troops to reinforce its border guards in Armenia and secure a peace settlement with Azerbaijan. The deployment was made at the request of Armenia to maintain peace in Nagorno-Karabakh. Voting is underway in Burkina Faso's presidential and legislative elections. Over 6.5 million are registered to vote, but no ballots will cast in 1/5 of the country's territory. The Electoral Commission says most of the polling stations in north and east will remain shut due to the fear of violence. The official data shows that at 400,000 people, which is nearly 7% of the electorate, will be unable to cast their votes. The U.S. Embassy has issued a warning to American citizens in Burkina Faso amid a deteriorating security situation. 12 contenders are appearing in the election, with current President Roch Kabore, who is looking for a second 5-year term. Opposing candidate Zafirine Diabre has accused the president of orchestrating a massive fraud to secure re-election. In Guatemala, thousands of demonstrators have set the country's parliament on fire in a protest against slashing of healthcare and education budget. The protesters demand a presidential veto of the budget. 14 people were injured after clashes broke out with police, who used tear gas to disperse the mob. With cuts on healthcare and education, the $12.9 billion budget has increased public debt. Vice President Guillermo Castillo has opposed the budget plan, demanding President Alejandro Giamatti's resignation. In a tweet, Giamatti said he is considering modifications to the budget. The president added he has been meeting with various groups to present changes to the controversial budget. Giamatti took office in January, shortly before the pandemic struck the country, home to an already weak economy. Former Prime Minister of Pakistan, Nawaz Sharif's mother, Shamim Akhtar, has passed away at the age of 89 years in London. She was suffering from Alzheimer's disease. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan and Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi expressed sorrow over Begum Shamim's death. Army Chief General Qamar Javed Bajwa also expressed grief and heartfelt condolences to the Sharif family. Excavations in Pompeii have recovered the remains of two dwellers frozen in time by an eruption of Mount Vesuvius nearly 2,000 years ago. More in the following report.
Pompeii, 23 kilometers southeast of Naples, was home to about 13,000 people when it was buried under ash, pumice pebbles and dust as it endured the force of the Vesuvius eruption in 79 AD. The ruins were not discovered until the 16th century and organized excavations began about 1750. Now, Italian archaeologists have unearthed the exceptionally preserved bodies of two men.
The two victims are an incredible and extraordinary testimony of that morning of October 25, when the eruption took place. These two victims were perhaps seeking refuge when they were swept away by the pyroclastic current at 9 a.m. when the plume gets to Pompeii, destroying the higher part of the city completely, killing everybody in its path.
Archaeologists have tentatively identified the remains as a wealthy landowner and a younger enslaved person. The remains were found in Civita Juliana, 700 meters northwest of the center of ancient Pompeii, in an underground chamber in the area of a large villa being excavated.
NASA and European Space Agency have launched a joint oceanography satellite. Sentinel-6 is the first of two identical satellites to provide critical measurements of sea level change.
The satellite was launched on board a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket from Vandenberg Air Force Base in California. ESA said the Sentinel-6 will make transmission contact 1 hour and 33 minutes after takeoff. The satellite will map 95% of the Earth's ice-free ocean every 10 days. The EU and ESA have committed over €8 billion to the project until 2020. ESA Director Rolf Densing said rising sea levels were going to affect millions of people.
We are expecting Sentinel-6 to continue to show the chronology of rising sea levels. Scientists are predicting that by the end of the century, sea levels will have risen by 40 to 80 centimeters, and that is dramatic, and many people will be affected by this.
The European Space Agency has described the launch as the most ambitious project to observe the Earth.
China is set to launch an unmanned spacecraft to the moon this week to bring back lunar rocks. This will be the first attempt by any nation to retrieve samples from Earth's natural satellite since the 1970s. More in the following report.
The Chang'e 5 probe will seek to collect material that can help scientists understand more about the moon's origins and formation. The mission will test China's ability to remotely acquire samples from space ahead of more complex missions. It may help answer questions such as how long the moon remained volcanically active in its interior and when its magnetic field dissipated. The team behind the project conducted its final joint test before the launch.
The mission will last 23 days, involving 23 times of major orbit control, 6 times of major separation control, powered lowering, moon surfacing taking off, lunar orbit rendezvous, and other relevant tasks of higher risks in the history.
If successful, the mission will make China only the third country to have retrieved lunar samples following the US and the Soviet Union decades ago.
In Switzerland, modest COVID-19 restrictions have allowed near-normal operations in Zermatt town, while other alpine resorts keep their lifts shut. What arrangement authorities have made and what people think on the glacier where Zermatt offers year-round skiing in this report.
Blue skies over the Matterhorn drew skiers and snowboarders to Zermatt as well as police to break up crowds. The resort is known throughout the world for its skiing, especially Trift-G for its moguls. The high altitude results in consistent skiing throughout the summer. Switzerland hopes a middle way of social distancing and mask wearing on lifts can prop up pillars of the economy and tourism without fueling the pandemic. Zermatt mayor also thinks the future looks bright.
We're trying hard at the moment to improve every possibility that is been offered. So with the distance, social distancing, masks, whatever. Because we believe we have to live with COVID-19. There's no way around it, and people need vacation, people need mountains, people need fresh air and sunshine, and that's our aim, to make it possible.
Some Swiss resorts, including Davos to the northwest, boast of cold fogging equipment. They think the weather is cold enough to blast the interiors of gondolas and kill 99% of the viruses, bacteria and spores in a minute. The Swiss Tourism Association has even adopted clean and safe as its motto in the hope of easing tourist nerves. But no matter what, there is no denying the sense of release from confinement that a day on slopes can bring for some.
I gotta say I'm not really scared. I think it would be worse if you could not go to the mountains at all. And I think the protection here is kind of good for me, at least. There are not so many people here, so I think it's okay.
Switzerland is being a second-wave coronavirus hotspot with 5,000 infections a day and mounting deaths. So much so, earlier authorities asked the vulnerable to put their wishes on paper in case the worst should happen. But Swiss resorts attempt to make some profit, while neighboring countries have all ordered even the high-altitude lifts to remain closed for now.
And now it's time to take a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back, and I'm moving on to the business stories. Canada and Britain have signed an interim post-Brexit trade agreement. The Canada-United Kingdom Trade Continuity Agreement will take effect on January 1st. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson and Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau signed the deal virtually. In a statement, the UK's International Trade Secretary Liz Truss said the agreement covers small businesses and underpins $2.66 billion worth of trade. Canadian Trade Secretary Mary Nix said the transitional agreement replicates the EU deal on tariff reductions and provisions for labour. Britain has become Canada's fifth largest trading partner after the United States, China, Mexico and Japan. In tennis, Daniil Medvedev beats Rafael Nadal in the semi-finals to book a battle with Dominic Thiem for the ATP Finals title. In a sizzling contest, the Russian thrashed the 20-time Grand Slam champion Rafael Nadal 3-6, 7-6 and 6-3. Medvedev was a more aggressive player throughout and was composed in the final set. Nadal posted errors. The Russian hit 42 winners and smashed 13 aces to outclass the former world number one. The 24-year-old Medvedev reached the semi-finals as the only unbeaten player in his group. Earlier, Thiem defeated Serbia's world number one Novak Djokovic 7-5, 6-7 and 7-6. The Austrian fought back from a 4-0 deficit in the deciding third set tie-break to win and book his place in the final. In the English Premier League, Everton beat Fulham 3-2 in a thrilling encounter at Craven Cottage. Dominic Calvert-Lewin continued his fine form with 2 goals as Everton returned to winning ways. A late Ruben Loftus-Cheek goal made things interesting, but it was not enough to prevent Fulham from yet another defeat. After this result, Everton are 6th on the table, whereas Fulham are just above the relegation zone. Earlier, Manchester United beat West Brom 1-0 at Old Trafford, while Tottenham Hotspur beat Manchester City 2-0 to go top at the Premier League. In football, Borussia Dortmund have thrashed Hertha Berlin 5-2 at an away fixture in Bundesliga League. Erling Braut Haaland scored 4 second-half goals for the men in yellow. Brazilian winger Matheus Cunha scored in either half for Hertha. The informed Haaland has scored 21 times in 17 matches for club and country this season. Dortmund will return to Champions League action on Tuesday, playing host to Club Brugge. In another fixture, Eintracht Frankfurt played a 1-1 draw against RB Leipzig at home. Ayman Barkok's first half goal was equalized by Leipzig's Yusuf Poulsen in the second half. And now it's time to have a look at the weather update across the globe. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.